Shir and Sichos Haran. We are on Seif Kuf Tzadik Gimel, paragraph 193. The Arizal said in reference to the topic of money, topic of gaining money and spending money, using it. The Arizal said that the necessary powers or actions that pertain to money the same as those that pertain to food. In food, there are different forces, different types of functions that the body accomplishes. The same thing a person must apply to money. For example, when a person eats, there is the power or function of retention, retaining the food, knowing how to receive it, how to limit the amount that the intake of a person, or he could harm himself, how to see that the food remains within. He shouldn't return it, regurgitate it. Retaining that food is one function. The same thing applies to money. A person has to know how to retain the money he's got, not to earn it and then squander it and lose it immediately. Secondly, there is the power of digestion, function of the digestive tract, where the food is digested and then it is distributed through the bloodstream to the various parts of the body, and of course selectively a certain part of that food goes to the heart, the main arteries, some go to different organs of the body. And this is one of the marvels of creation. The fact that Hashem gave to the body power of digesting, converting the food to different forms, and then distribute it to all the parts of the body that need this nourishment. Same thing too. If a person earns money, he must know how to spend this money wisely and properly. How to allocate the necessary sum for living expenses, naturally the most vital item, to tzedakah, to give the meiser, distribute the money where it will do the greatest benefit, to spend money for his children's sake, to educate them properly, send them to yeshiva, mitzvah Arizal, expenses for Talmud Torah, other forms of expenditures, whether they are for spiritual or material purposes. And then too, in eating, there is the power of relieving oneself or getting rid of the waste matter. Here too, there is certain parts of the money that are considered waste, where a person has to give money to a non-Jew who works for him, or a person must spend money on things that are tamei, on things that are waste matter. Arizal said the Baal Shem Tov had a very special power, that where his money automatically was distributed properly. Baal Shem HaKodesh would accept money from various people as tzedakah. Of course, it is known that giving money to the tzadik emes is the greatest suchus possible in the midst of tzedakah itself. Now, there were tzadikim who gave money to Baal Shem HaKodesh. There were ordinary people, simple people. There were also the shoim, very evil people. Baal Shem HaKodesh took this money, distributed, spent it for different purposes of kedusha. It was spent for the sake of his teaching Torah. It was spent for the sake of supporting the valuable institutions that existed then, the yeshivas. It was spent on the poor people who needed food for Shabbos Kodesh, very sacred purposes. And also there was money that was spent for the horses, to feed the horses of the Baal Shem Kodesh's coach, to pay for the coachmen, the workers who were goyim. The money the Baal Shem Kodesh received, automatically, that money that came from good people was spent for good causes. The money that came from Rishoyim, though it was mixed together, merged with all the other monies, that money itself still went to the waste matter causes. Whereas an ordinary person who doesn't have this blessing, who's not endowed with this type of privilege, should see to it, spending his money, he should do so properly, wisely, see that the money is distributed in a wise manner, and that he should give priorities to that which deserves priority. Especially as the Gemara says that a person should know where to invest. Invest your money where you receive the greatest dividends. For example, in giving tzedakah, a person should be aware of the fact that he is not really spending money. He must reach that level of faith where he believes implicitly that when he gives money to tzedakah, especially when he gives meiser, he takes a full 10% of his earnings, his salary, or his wages, or his profits in his business venture. The full 10% is given away. He has no physical benefit from this money at all. He does not see it again, or so it seems, and yet he must have complete faith that that money was not spent, it did not leave his possession. The money was invested. There is a record kept, a heavenly record kept of every penny of that money that is spent, invested, and there is a profit, a dividend paid for that investment. A dividend pays very highly. The interest rate is a very high one, paid from heaven. The interest rate is something that a person receives during his lifetime. He might invest only $1 or a few pennies for tzedakah giving to a poor man. The dividends could run to thousands of dollars for that one single dollar. In addition, though, the principal is not touched. He gave his $1 or $100 for meiser. The $100, that principal remains intact. It stays in the bank of heaven, and it is collected only after a person passes away. Though he received the dividends that amount to many-fold, many times this amount during his lifetime, yet the principal remains intact. When he comes to heaven, he then collects, he then withdraws the entire principal. Not in an earthly form of money, but in a spiritual form. This is converted in heaven to something very spiritual. As Arizal says, money is the same origin as the nefesh, as the soul. So that in heaven it becomes a soul item, a soulful item, a spiritual item, and this remains with him everlastingly in Gan Eden. But this requires a pure, simple faith. The emunah must be so perfect, so implicit, that he should not feel the slightest pang of remorse, regret, or pain when he gives the meiser. On the contrary, he should feel confident that this is money that's being invested and never lost. That is distributing money wisely and properly, and for this, of course, he receives his due reward. Arizal said, too, that the main evil desire that pertains to money, of course, money itself, it is said, is the root of all evil. Actually, that's not exactly true. It's the lack of money which is the root of all evil. A person who feels he lacks money will go to the extent of stealing, stealing, or neglecting to give money for tzedakah because he feels he needs that 10% for himself. He can't afford it at the present time. Someday perhaps he'll pay it. And of course, in most cases, that someday never comes. So what is the reason why a person has this evil taiva? What causes this taiva, this evil desire, specifically with money? It's one of the three major evil desires that exist. The answer is because he does not have the keli, does not have the utensil, the means of receiving this money, which itself is something sacred, and manipulating it, or using it in its various forms, the forms of retention, digestion, distribution, and so on. A person, of course, if he does not have this, at least the key is to be mispalel. Daven to Hashem for help. His this is the cure-all, and it surely will help for this too. The person feels that he has not done with his money as he should have done throughout his life, throughout a period of time in his lifetime, should daven to Hashem in his hisbodedus and with intensity, with deep kavanah, that Hashem should help him at least from now on to improve, to correct the past, begin to live properly by spending the money in a manner that it is in accordance with the dictates of the Torah. Arizal said that, he once said that every person, no matter how wealthy, no matter how well off he is, still has periods of yisurim, of suffering. Whether it is physical suffering, whether it is mental anguish, whether it is financial problems, or, what's even worse, a lack of nachas from children, chas v'sholom. He does not find that his children are acting the way he would like them to, they're not going on the righteous path. Each person has different types of yisurim. There are some who suffer because of government worries, too much taxes. Others who suffer because they have an innate fear of the unknown. They are the worrying type. All these types of yisurim, Arizal says, after all this, even where it is true, people do have reason to consider themselves not too well off. They are either sick, suffering physically, chas v'sholom, or they have had financial setbacks, they are impoverished, they find it difficult to make ends meet, to provide the family with necessities that do them. All these cases, a person should realize that still Hashem is still being very good to us, extremely good. It's just that we don't know how to minimize the feeling of suffering. We've got to realize that we have to maximize, increase our feelings about how good Hashem is to us, and to disregard, to an extent, the degree of suffering. Because if a person is truly attached to Hashem, his mind, his action, then all the yisurim, no matter what type of suffering there is, even if it is physical torture, it cannot compare to a thought, a person's mental being, when it is elevated to a point where it's literally attached to thoughts of serving Hashem. And therefore it is through a person's mind, willpower, that he can actually be mevatel, he can make void all the yisurim. This is something that is recognized throughout the world, where people say that suffering is only mental. We find those who have the power of concentration who can take physical torture without feeling anything because they can concentrate on something else strongly enough. So imagine that if a person concentrates on his love for Hashem, it is possible for a person to stand before an oppressor. Cases where Jews were being put to death on Kiddush Hashem for the sake of their religion. They were put into the fire, actual fire, gas chambers or cauldrons, being burnt to death, scalded to death, chas v'sholom, tortured to death. They took it smilingly, without crying out at all. Rabbi Yaakov, when he was being put to death, smiled. He was happy. Do these people feel pain? The answer is, if their ahavas Hashem is so great, they are so thrilled with the thought of being able to die al Kiddush Hashem, they feel no physical pain. There's actually no suffering on their part. And that's because their emunah is that perfect. It's reached a degree of perfection where the yisurim becomes completely nullified. So too, Rabbi Nachman says that it's possible in a simpler form. A person finds that he is chas v'sholom ill. His reaction should be why am I ill? Who has caused my illness? This was an act of Hashem. This is what Hashem wants right now. In that case, then, my body is fulfilling the will of Hashem by being sick. Therefore, I am now attached to Hashem. And I should enjoy this. I should be happy about this. To go much further, the Rosenfeld says, the greatest tragedy possible is when a parent loses a child, chas v'sholom. It's much greater than when children lose their parents. Even at a time of a tragedy like that, if Hashem takes a child, chas v'sholom, the person should say, who is taking this child? Hashem. That is the will of Hashem. That means that right now, this action of losing the child means that something is being done to me which brings me close to the will of Hashem. Therefore, I should be satisfied with that thought. Now, to those who don't feel this, those who cannot grasp this thought, then it seems awesome. It seems impossible. It seems like a very strange type of statement. However, those who are accustomed to learning about the degree of great tzaddikim, their attachment in serving Hashem, they can very well understand this and hope to be able to achieve this. Because in Elam Haba, when there is no longer a goof, a body, any of these items, then a person is really close to Hashem. Everything has been removed. So that now when a person is sick, that means he is closer to Elam Haba than when he is well. When a person has suffering, he is closer to Hashem than when he is enjoying the physical part of life, because when the body suffers, the neshama thrives, the same as on a fast day. We know that when a person fasts, when the goof is nichna, the body is subdued, and the neshama, the soul, is elevated. So at a time like that, a person is closer to Elam Haba than normally, and therefore, hence, he is closer to Hashem, which should bring to him a degree of deep satisfaction and joy. Of course, this takes a lot of effort, a lot of training to be zeichet to a madrega of this kind. At least we know what to look forward to. Also, we know about having some thought of consolation. If ever a person does have a little bit yisurim, at least not to take it to heart too much, and to understand the proper attitude. Be zeichet to an attitude where a person accepts everything happily because this is what Hashem wants. Hashem's will is being fulfilled. I'm taking part in this. I'm closer to Hashem now. I accept it without question. That is the amunah a person should strive for. Rosenfeld tells about a statement that Menachem once made to his Talmidim, where the Menachem was present. Menachem said, that which I am doing with you, my students, my Talmidim, and for you, that is something which you really must do yourself. This meant, what am I doing for you? I'm being mekarev you. I'm taking you who are so remote, so far from Avodas Hashem, serving Hashem, and bringing you to Teshuva, to return to Hashem, to make you more religious, to ma'ala you to a higher madreget, elevate you. This is one of the great acts. It's an act of tchiyas hamesim. Person's neshama is dead, or partially dead. Tzadik emes was mekarev that person, brings him close to Hashem, revives the neshama. He gives back life to it. So R Nosson was very surprised. He writes that he marveled at this statement. Rabbeinu said, this, what I'm doing for you, you are supposed to be doing yourself, because this is too small for me. It's too small a type of service. I should not be bothered with this item. Rosenfeld finally asked, how is that possible? Isn't bringing a Jew close to Hashem, to speak to a Jew who's far, to influence him, to inspire him, to do tshuva and come close to Hashem, Isn't that the greatest possible mitzvah? Isn't that the highest avodah possible? Why is that called small, and we should do it ourselves? Surely we need the tzadik emes to help us, to bring us close. Arizal explained, and he said that's true. It's true that is an extraordinary degree of mitzvah. Zayda Kodesh says, Zakor Ashrei, to that person who's zecher, to spend his time to succeed in bringing a dosha closer to Hashem to do tshuva. Ashrei, to the person who's zecher to that. However, a dosha needs compassion, he needs pity, he needs help, but there are ones who need help even more so than the Rishonim, even more so than those who are very far from Hashem. And those are ones who are not bodies, the unborn neshamas, the souls that have not been born yet, souls that are without a garment, without a cloak, they are unclothed, and they are in a plain location, an area where it's impossible for them to enter into a body. For some reason, they're on a madrega where they are not fit to enter into a body, to be born, to come to this world. And therefore, it is a much greater pity on them than those who have come to this world, those who have lived, even though they have sinned. Because even if they committed sins, even the Shoyim, still, during their lifetime, the Gemara says even the Shoyim do perform mitzvahs. They have done certain mitzvahs to a degree, or they have children who will be doing mitzvahs later on, their future generations, and there is some hope for them, either for themselves, the mitzvahs they have done that will deserve credit, deserve reward, more so than one who has no mitzvahs at all. Or at least their children will also credit them. The actions of children are credited to the parents. However, for these neshamas, these souls who have not been born yet, and for whom it's impossible for them to be born, then they cannot rise upwards, they cannot advance themselves at all, and on them it is the greatest pity of all possible. But that, Rabbi Nachman said, is the work I should be using. I should strive for that type of avodah. I should occupy myself, dedicate myself to that task of helping those neshamas that are completely helpless. Bringing others close to Hashem, you can do also, he said to the students, because you cannot hope to achieve the reaching out and drawing of those neshamas that are helpless. That's my task. But you could bring others close to Hashem, and therefore, for me, that is small. Despite that, of course, it's understood. Rabbi Nachman still spent his lifetime, devoted all his efforts for the sake of his Talmidim, although he also did occupy himself with those helpless souls. Rabbi Nachman said, as far as speaking about the souls, they're also Gilgulim, reincarnations that are unknown to the Kabbalah. Those who wrote the Sifrei Kabbalah who deal with the topic of Gilgulim. They reveal the fact that certain great names in the Torah are Gilgulim of former generations. They reveal the lineage of one Gilgul after the other. But even the greatest, the Kabbalah, greatest Sifrei Kabbalah, are unaware about certain Gilgulim which Rabbi Nachman knew of. They were still kept a secret. Others that have not been revealed to the world. And two, the details about Gilgulim, the fact that a Gilgul means a person is reborn. He had lived previously, he is reborn again, he is given the opportunity to fulfill the mitzvahs which he failed to do during his previous lifetime, or to correct some of the sins he committed then. At the same time, just as a child is born with the inherited traits of parents, children resemble parents in many instances, so too in this case is a Gilgul actually a derivation of a person who lived previously. And therefore he inherits those traits of character that he possessed during his former life. This too he's born with these traits because he is part of that same guf, neshama that lived before. Inheriting these traits will bring about certain items, will cause certain items that the person cannot really comprehend. For example, Rabbi Nachman says, we'll find that a person has a desire to go traveling. He'd like to travel throughout the country to visit different cities, and he'll spend his time and effort preparing for a journey, for a trip, and then suddenly, as he's about to begin the trip, he finds that there is an obstacle, a barrier. He cannot make this journey, and it becomes voided. He doesn't understand why. There's no possible reasoning for this. The answer is that there is no use. It's futile to search for a reason. The reason is something that occurred in a former Gilgul, which now he must refrain from making this specific trip. This is only one example, of course. Then I'll say that this refers to a lot of other cases where things happen to a person, he cannot figure out the reason for it. He should know the reason is that it's because of certain characteristics that he possessed in his former Gilgul, or certain acts he committed then, which warrant a continuation of that story. He's up to a certain point, he must continue that story from then on. He doesn't realize that there is a past to everything. And of course, as the Zohar Kodesh says, this fact explains all the major questions that are asked in the Gemara. Questions as to the whys. Why do some people suffer more than others? Why do some people who are evil live a life of pleasure, life of bliss? Why do things happen to people who are apparently innocent? Why do children suffer? Infants who never committed sins. The answer is to all these questions is that they are Gilgulim. They are not infants. They are not children. They are not just 20 or 30 years old. These people are all hundreds of years old. They have a past history, and they're continuing that history now. In heaven, of course, there is the full pattern of past, present, and future, and there it makes sense. Then we can see the continuity of this person's lifetime. If ever there is a question as to why, the answer simply is, it is called the Seid HaGilgul. The secret of the Gilgul, the secret of the past, the secret of the present reincarnation, the Gilgul of the person. And that is why, that is the true answer, the Zohar Kodesh says, to the question of tzadik v'aloi l'shu v'tevloi. Why tzadikim many times suffer, and the evil find no suffering in life. Arizal spoke about the greatness of the quality of his Torah. The Torah that he spoke, the shiurim that he gave, all that are found in his sichos, his talks, especially in his forum. The Sefer Likutei Moharan, the different Torahs, chapters in Likutei Moharan, Arizal said that a person who has a mind that is deep enough to understand could see that the entire Torah of the Arizal, all his words are Ruach HaKodesh. There is a heavenly spirit found in every one of the words, and through this heavenly spirit, a person learning the words of the Arizal can actually foresee the future. In the Arizal's words, there is Ruach HaKodesh, which means prophecy. A person can predict the future if he delves deeply enough and reads Rabbi Arizal's words correctly. An example that Arizal gives what happened just 1 year before Rabbi Arizal's Histalkus. Rabbi Arizal gave a shiur. The shiur was Torah Samach Zayin, and Likutei Moharan Tanina, the second volume. Shiur called Bereshus Le'eni Kol Yisrael. Bereshus is the first word of the Torah, Le'eni Kol Yisrael, the last words of the Torah. Rabbi Arizal tied these two together to show there is a connection between the beginning and the end of Torah. This Arizal spoke about Bereshis is the Reish Bayis. The Reish Bayis, the head of the world, the head of the worldly household. That means the tzadik emes, from whom comes forth all the shefa that the world receives. Just as the Gemara says about the Menachem Mendel Schneerson, there was a Tana that was so holy that each day a voice came from heaven and stated, a voice from Hashem, stated that every bit of earnings, every bit of income that is found in the entire world each day is purely in the zechus of the Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So great was this Tana, so heavenly, and from him came forth all the shefa. The shefa, that means the blessings, all types of blessings, come from heaven. But heaven itself derives its power from the tzadik emes. Tzadik is Soid Olam. He is the foundation of the world. It does not mean just the earth. It means the entire creation. So Kaliyochel, heaven itself, derives its power from the tzadik emes, and then transmits it to the world in the form of shefa. That means that the tzadik emes is the one who gives the shefa to the whole world. As that voice that came out about Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Rabbi Nachman said that the words of Rabbi Nachman's teachings are so filled with this power of nevuah, Ruach HaKodesh, that a person can actually foresee the future. In this chapter, Rabbi Nachman spoke about the Reish Bayis, and there he speaks about the fact that the Reish Bayis is nostalgic, the passing, the istalkus of the Reish Bayis. The Reish Bayis is nostalgic. It is a great tragedy that affects the entire world. It brings about the opposite of light. It brings about darkness. It is the category of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash stood, meant there was light that emanated through the entire world. When the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it was burnt, that light turned to destructive fire. And this is the same with the existence of the tzadik emes. His light shines throughout the world, and he's nostalgic. It means the destructive fire, which results in physical fires. A tzaddik is nostalgic, and generally there is a plague of fires around the world. This was seen in the past. The great tzaddik were nostalgic. There were always a series of fires that destroyed entire villages or cities. Rabbi Nachman spoke about this Torah. No one at the time understood what Rabbi Nachman meant. This was said on Shabbos Kodesh. That Shabbos, Rabbi Nachman said these words of Torah, and no one was aware of the fact that 2 days prior to this, one of the greatest tzaddikim living at that time, I believe Yitzchak Baditch Arizal, had been nostalgic that previous Thursday. There were no communications then that could reach the city Rabbi Nachman was in to notify him about the passing of the tzaddik, so it was physically impossible for any person to be aware of his istalkus. Physically impossible. Rabbi Nachman, though, when he said the words of this Torah, spoke these words in a very sad, low tone. No one could understand why, what he was trying to bring out with these words. The following Monday, 2 days later, finally the news arrived about the istalkus of the Yitzchak, and now they first began to understand how Rabbi Nachman's words contained a revelation, a prophecy that there had been the istalkus of the tzadik emes of the Yitzchak. This, then, Rabbi Nachman said, is the fact with his teachings. If a person could see, look deeply into his words, and understand, he could actually foretell the future. At least, the person is honest, looking at the Rabbi Nachman's words, at least after the item happens, after the occurrence itself, he can look back in retrospect, look at the words of Rabbi Nachman, and see that this was predicted already previous to Rabbi Nachman's words. Of course, that was in those days. fact is that even now, one who can see deeply enough, learn with a true depth and understanding and faith of Arizal's status, can actually foresee the future day by day. A person can see where things happen, they come to pass, especially with Rabbi Arizal's Talmidim of the present. Things that occur to them where there is actually a hint given reference to that in Rabbi Arizal's words. A person is zecher to get to Rabbi Arizal's Sion, he finds that his trip, his journey, is listed in detail in the words of the Kutim. A person goes through a lot of difficulty getting to Eretz Yisrael. He finds that his journey is detailed also, and with advice how to overcome these obstacles, his manias, in the Ben Arizal's words. Ben Arizal said, I have a place for every single Talmud of the future. And all my concern means that I am worried about them. I will do my best to rectify their shortcomings and to assist them, aid them, whenever they need assistance in performing these vital mitzvahs and in rising midarga l'darga. This was all seen in the words of this Torah Desha, this Torah Samach Zayin. Menel said that when a tzadik emes is nostalgic, then it is fitting that every person, even if he's not a wise person, he's not very learned, it is fit that every single person should feel it without even learning the Torah of Rabbi Nachman. He is supposed to feel himself the fact there was a passing of a tzaddik. How? He's supposed to feel it within his bones. There should be a tiredness, there should be a sadness about his actions, some inexplicable type of effect, physical effect upon himself or mentally, a depressed feeling that should portend some type of tragedy that occurred. This, even the simplest person should feel when there is a loss of a tzaddik. This, Rabbeinu said, is something that pertains to every person. Those, of course, who are more advanced could see much more clearly and much more than the ordinary. So we find that there are certain signs that are obvious. We don't see them today, but relatively there are in a smaller sense. The Gemara says when the rabbis of the Gemara were nostalgic, certain miracles occurred. The waters, for example, the streams, the rivers turned to blood, or the walls shed tears, or other things happened where the crops stopped growing. There was a plague that broke out because of the fact that there was this great loss that took place. So even the inanimate objects, the world itself, feels the loss of its tzaddik, and surely those who are alive should have a deep, innate feeling to detect the fact there is this great loss. And in fact, there are things that, if let us say the walls do not shed tears, if water does not turn to blood, certainly there are signs in heaven. Those who could see or read the stars will find a complete change in the galaxies because of the fact that a great leader has died. Even if Lahavdil, a goy, a king, dies, there's a whole change in heaven. The Riyah Kodesh says that when a leader is gone, there's a new leader that rises up. It has effect on a lot of items. You find many times that there is an earthquake, a mountain is divided, or two mountains are merged together through this earthquake. This refers to the heavenly leaders too, the angels. One is deposed, he's dethroned, and he's given a smaller position, or we find that he is elevated to a higher position. And this manifests itself in natural phenomena on earth. Of course, this takes a lot of wisdom for one to detect. At least, let us say at least, as far as we are concerned, let us respect the depth, the deep wisdom, the kedusha, the holy powers of these great tzaddikim who knew about such things, could recognize them so simply. And ashrei to the person who is that close to these tzaddikim. Arizal said in the words of Torah too, there is Musa. You have a statement in these words about a chiddush, an interpretation of a phrase in the Torah. It's an interesting phrase, but is it something that affects us? Is it something that teaches us, that guides us? Arizal said every word is actually Musa, a lesson guiding us how to conduct ourselves spiritually, religiously. How can we recognize these guiding words? They seem to be just plain, dry statements. We can recognize them by performing the greatest act possible. As I once said, the greatest nachas, kaviyachol in heaven, Hashem is when a person learns words of Torah, and then he davens to Hashem, Hashem, let me fulfill what I have just learned. I've just learned about the mitzvah of tzitzis, mitzvah of kashrus. Help me to fulfill this mitzvah thoroughly and completely. So by taking this Torah and converting it into tefillah, it is the greatest nachas since the days of creation. This Arizal states very emphatically, and the greatest tefillah that exists, even in his Vedus itself. The greatest tefillah is to take a Torah, to learn, for example, a chapter in the Likutei Moharan, convert that into a tefillah. This is what Rav Nosson devoted part of his life to, where he composed the Sefer Likutei Tefillos. It is filled with very inspirational tefillos. However, more important, it's based directly upon the Torahs in the Likutei Moharan. For every Torah in the Likutei Moharan, practically, Rav Nosson has a tefillah where Arizal once said, one of his Talmidim once said, that Rav Nosson's Likutei Tefillos is so great, aside from the fact that it's so emotional, the person can daven with much greater emotion, much greater kavanah through these tefillos. Also, we can see how Rav Nosson fulfilled this statement, convert Torah to tefillah, because with the Likutei Tefillos, Rav Nosson actually made a pedish, a commentary, explanation of the Likutei Moharan. There are many times where the Likutei Moharan itself is very difficult to understand. If you say the words of the tefillah, you'll understand actual pshat in the Likutei Moharan, because Rav Nosson converts it into its simplest form, where the most ordinary person can use these words of the Torah in the form of tefillah. The form of tefillah meaning he davens for what those words imply. So thereby he explains the words and then uses them as a prayer to Hashem. And as we said, this is the greatest nachas because this is the highest form of tefillah that is possible. Therefore, Arizal said, and if you look deeply enough, you study the words of Arizal, they are not made just to show us depth in learning, not just made to show us greatness in explaining certain passages of the Gemara or the Zohar, Kodesh, and Kabbalah. It's not just for that, though of course there is infinite depth in Arizal's words. But more important than that is that there is a Musa. It's not that this does not refer only to those who are very great tzaddikim and those who know the mystical secrets. It refers to the simplest person, to help the simplest person perform every single mitzvah in its proper perspective, to help him have a greater ahava, a stronger love and desire to serve Hashem by doing these mitzvahs, to respect the mitzvah itself, and to carry it out to its utmost. Again, this is accomplished. The person can understand this and see these words in Arizal's Torah by making tefillos out of these Torahs. By doing that, he accomplishes double purpose. He is to perform the mitzvah of making tefillos out of it, and also learning the true kavanah of Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi Nachman's kavanah in saying the Torah was not for the sake of learning, but for the sake of translating it into action, to serve Hashem with these words. This is the part of the greatness of Arizal's Teidos, we should be zecher b'yemes, study Arizal's words, first with emunah, second with the intention of learning it, teaching it, fulfilling it, and thereby coming much closer to Arizal, serving Hashem b'yemes, b'yah, b'yira, meriting, saying the b'yas girl tzadik and heda, Amen. Amen. We continue to share in Sichos Haran, Seif Kuf Tzadik Ches, paragraph 198. We know from Rabbi Nachman's writings, Rabbi Nachman wrote a few Sforim, and one of the outstanding Sforim that was ever revealed to this world is Rabbi Nachman's Sipurei Maisios, where we see the fact that it is possible to have stories. The stories would seem to be something very simple, elementary for children. And yet these stories are on such a level that it is higher than any of the regular writings of the Torah. It's above all the other writings, like Kabbalah is above regular study of Torah. So too do these stories contain all the hidden secrets of Kabbalah. And as Rabbi Nachman himself said, that the story of the Zion Bettlers is one that only Mashiach will eventually reveal an interpretation of. And it said that there was once a story that was told before the first Beis HaMikdash was built. That was the era of the Nevi'im, the prophets. Prophets are ones that Hashem spoke to, and they brought the message to the Jews. That was an era of tzaddikim who were higher than the later generations. Well, you had the rabbis of the Gemara who did not have the power of nevuah, of prophecy. They were on a higher level. When it was difficult to describe, to appraise the height, the greatness of these individuals, these Nevi'im. Menachem said there was one story that at that time was told, and this story, even the prophets, the Nevi'im did not understand, did not know the secret of this story, the secret depth of this story. Only two people alive understood that story. One was the Navi who told the story. The other was the person to whom he told the story. Those were the only two that understood that story. And of course the story was an unusual chiddush, something very unusual. Although it was told, it was revealed, yet it was an unusual chiddush. And now Rabbi Nachman said, I have that story, but with all the additions that were added to it the early generations. There's a different way to tell the story now. And not only that, but this story also explains a kasha, a question, which could not be answered otherwise. Kasha is, why are the Jews not the top nation in the world, even in this world? A lot of simple answers, that this world is for Arizal, for the Goyim, Olam Haba is for the Jews. The fact is, though, that still, if a diamond is a diamond, it's better than glass. And since the Jews are gems, the Goyim are synthetic, they're imitations, they are dirt, they are evil. So why shouldn't the Jews be considered valuable, priceless in comparison to the Goyim? Simple question, yet There is no solid, concrete answer to it, except that this story revealed the answer to that question. In addition, Rabbi Arizal said some people might think that this is the 12th story of the Sipurei Maisis, the story of the Baal Tefillah. It's a long story which deals with the topic of money. Rabbi Arizal said this is not the story of the Baal Tefillah, it's a much higher story, a story on a much higher madrega. However, the Nosson said that as thirsty as they were to hear this story, as much as they thirsted for it, craved hearing of it, it did not come to pass that Ben Azal should reveal the story to them. Nosson says, Ashrei to the one who will be zecher to hear this story in the future. When Mashiach comes, this story will be told by Rabbi Azal. Or Gan Eden. A person coming to Gan Eden, if he's zecher to be Mekusha to Rabbi Azal, zecher to get to Rabbi Azal's yeshiva, will hear the story then. What a heavenly type of blissful pleasure that would be to hear this story from Rabbi Azal. This is something for the future. We were not zecher to get it in this world, though we were zecher to get stories that obviously were so great, they are unparalleled, unmatched in the Seder of Kabbalah. As we said, the story of the Zion Betlers is so high that Mashiach will eventually reveal the secrets behind it. However, what we do notice, what we must stop and really take to heart at this point is the fact that when speaking about Rabbi Azal's greatness, we try to compare Rabbi Azal to tzaddikim in his generation, past generation. It goes so far back as the generation of the rabbis of the Gemara, the Meiroyim, to the Tanoim. Here we see, going still further back, generation of the Nevi'im. The Nevi'im themselves did not know this story, except for two that did. Two that knew the story in a lesser developed form. Rabbi Azal had this story complete, advanced form. Imagine then, try to imagine something we cannot, try to conceive the greatness of Rabbi Azal's Kedusha. When we say Rabbi Azal is the tzadik emes, that is absolute, unquestionable, irrefutable fact. Rabbi Azal is the tzadik emes. Ashrei to that person who is really Mekusha, because a story of this kind, which Nevi'im couldn't get then, those Mekusha to Rabbi Azal, the Nosson says, will get this story from Rabbi Azal. We should be zecher to that true hiskashus, zecher to that word that Nosson says, Ashrei. Rabbi Azal spoke about his Sefer Likutei Moharan, which is the Sefer of Rabbi Azal. And speaking about the greatness of the Sefer, not chas v'sholom lauding, praising his own works, just speaking factually about the depth of the Sefer. It's important a person should know the value of this Sefer. And also this Sefer, it would seem that any person could learn this Sefer in a superficial form, just above the surface. Some who are lumdim, who have a sharpened mind, could go deeper into the Sefer. Some would delve still deeper, would look for the Seders, and it said that a person cannot understand the Sefer Likutei Moharan. The only one that could understand it is he who knows how to say it, not how to learn it, but how to teach the Sefer, to give a shiur in it, to read, to say the Sefer forwards and backwards. One who could say Likutei Moharan forwards and backwards, he is one that understands the Sefer. To say it forwards and backwards. It's a difficult point. A person says Ashrei backwards, good, he knows the Ashrei by heart. What is the benefit of reading Ashrei backwards? Or saying Likutei Moharan backwards? Would we say that you can learn the Sefer backwards, take the sentence and read it from the end to the beginning? What is the gain, the benefit of knowing the Sefer backwards? These are the words of Rabbi Azal. One who knows the Sefer forwards and backwards, that person understands the Sefer. Also, a second statement, the Arizal said that every sefer has a preface, a Hakdama, explaining this is the Hakdama to the sefer, the preface, giving us an insight to the sefer, and then we go into the whole sefer. The Arizal said, my whole sefer, the whole Ikutim is Hakdamas. It's not a sefer, it's just a preface. To what? It's a preface Hakdama. It's filled with Hakdamas. Third, the Arizal said that with every chapter, with every Torah and Ikutim, with every saying, there are some sayings, a few lines to some of the chapter in Ikutim, every Torah with every saying, regardless of the length of the Torah, which means even the shortest, the one-line Torah too, a person who could perceive deeply, could delve deeply, could see in every chapter, in every paragraph, he could see the whole Torah. He'll find the whole Torah hidden in that chapter. What whole Torah? The whole Torah should be Ksal. Torah, Nevi'im, Silvan, and the entire Torah Shabbat Peh. It's Shas, Bavly, Yerushalmi, and so forth. And of course the entire Kabbalah. So deep is this sefer that every chapter you'll have in it encompassed all of the Torah Shabbat Ksal and Torah Shabbat Peh. These three statements bear a little enlightenment. First place, there are many interpretations, explanations of what the Arizal meant when they say a person must know how to say the Kutman forwards and backwards. For one thing, very simply, it means, the Arizal himself explained once, that in a Torah you have many different parts, segments. Each Torah has a number of paragraphs, one following the other. Now, a person, in order to understand the Arizal's words, must see the connection between each paragraph. Sometimes you find that one paragraph seems not to relate to the one before it, or to that one which is three paragraphs before it. A person like that does not understand the words of the Arizal. One that understands it is one that can understand, that can show the connection, relation between each paragraph. For example, if a Torah has 5 paragraphs, you must be able to show how the second paragraph is directly connected, continuation of the first. How the third paragraph is a continuation of the second, and how it is also related to the first, and how it is also related to the combination of the first and the second. The fourth paragraph, he must show how it continues from the third, how it's related directly to the second, also to the first, also to the combination of the second and third, the first and second, the first and third, the first, second, and third. He must show how the entire Torah is completely interwoven, forwards and backwards. You're up to the 5th paragraph, you've got to show you go back to the first, and you're still on the 5th. Going forward, you go backwards, and still you are advancing. You're going deeper. This is one explanation, what's meant by it, to show that a Torah is a continuity. It's continued and interwoven, a complex pattern that Arizal weaves in depth. And one who has a deep enough mind can see the connection of his words. Also, forwards and backwards means a person who goes forwards means one who rises upwards, one who advances. He becomes greater in learning, greater in Torah, greater in Tefillah, greater in Avodas Hashem, in serving Hashem. Backwards means one who tries, he's advancing, he feels good, and suddenly he falls. He commits kind of a wrong, or he becomes lax. He misses the kavanah in Tefillah, or his bodedus is shortened. He finds he's becoming distant from Hashem. He's not as close as before. He finds that his enthusiasm, his islavus, the fire, the spark is going out, chas v'sholom. Both of these type of people need enlightenment from Arizal's Torah. The one that can tell, speak, say that Arizal's Torah forwards and backwards. Forwards means to reach those who are forward, those who are going way up. They're advancing very highly. They're davening and learning with fire. They're rising high. To reach them and tell them, wait. Arizal says, don't become too boastful. Don't become filled with a conceit, with a pride, because there'll be a very terrible fall. Know that as high as you think you've gone, you're still very tiny, very small. You have a lot more to go. Strive for much more advancement than this. Do not be satisfied with where you are right now. I know that you are still nothing. That's the tachlis of Yediyah, of knowledge, is to realize that you know nothing. To those who have fallen, those who have gone backwards, Ben Azal's Torah teaches, you think you've gone backwards, you think you're further away from Hashem, you are now closer to Hashem. Your sheichen is daka. Hashem is much closer to those who are heartbroken, who are fallen, who are shattered. Those are the ones whose hearts are broken that Hashem is closest to. So the words of the Ben Azal are inspirational. They give new life, new hope. They tchias hamesim for those who seem to have died in the process of this battle against the Yetzer Hara. A person who can teach the Ben Azal's Torah and put the light on for those who have fallen, that person is able to learn the Ben Azal's words. This is the second interpretation of this. Of course, there are many more, many deeper ones, but suffice it to say, meanwhile, at least we understand a little what the Ben Azal said about learning the Torah forwards and backwards. Ben Azal said that every word of the Torah, all of my Torah, he said, are hakdamas, are prefaces. Now, you take the preface, it's very simple. This book, Lahavdil, deals with this and this story. Or this sefer deals with this type of commentary. You go into the sefer itself, you got to struggle, you got to concentrate. Ben Azal says, my words are all hakdamas. If you go into the sefer, now you find that it's not hakdamas, it's so deep and so difficult, like the end of the line rather than the beginning of the line. You know, you've reached the climax, you've reached the ultimate, and yet it is only a hakdama. How is that possible? The one who understands that person can realize this. This we could see. You take a paragraph of the Kutumanan, and you cover it, what you think is having covered it well, you know it well, and that's about it. You are now complete. And then, R Nosson takes the same paragraph, but Ted Kutumanan, and he wrote a sefer Likuti Halachas, 8 volumes of Likuti Halachas, on this sefer Kutumanan, and in these 8 volumes, every paragraph of Ben Azal's written Kutumanan, that Rosenfeld has a big chapter on it. This is only the beginning. He shows, he opens the door, puts on the light to show what the Ben Azal referred to. These are all hints, a preface to a long topic in depth. And this, throughout the whole Kutumanan, you have the Likuti Halachas, which is much longer, and which shows that each sentence leads to a whole brand new topic. The third, the Ben Azal said that a person, you go through the whole Torah on Torah Sh'niksav, Torah Sh'bal Peh, on each chapter. This could be many skeptics who would doubt this. How can you say that one chapter in the Kutumanan, one page, contains all the 60 Gemaras? It contains all the Tanakh. It contains the 4 divisions of Shulchan Aruch. 4 divisions of Shulchan Aruch are so complex, they cover all of the Gemara, plus the dinim of Iksav and Al-Peh, but they're 4 solid divisions. How can you say one page of Ben Azal's? Persons are inclined to disbelieve this. Well, they find at least a trace of skepticism in their heart. Rabbi Nachman's grandfather, Rabbi Nachman Zal, who wrote the Papadois L'Chochma, undertook to show, of course, he was a Goin Eilam. He was one of the greatest geniuses that ever lived, depth of mind, and very humble too, very modest. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Nachman. He decided to show, take an example. So he took the first chapter in the Kutumanan. It's only one daf. It's one of the shorter Torahs. Took the first chapter and said, I'll show you how these words are so. They're true. This first chapter, he proceeded to go on to the 4 Shulchan Aruchs. He wrote a whole sefer on the first chapter, Nachas HaShulchan, in which he shows that every chapter in Shulchan Aruch can be derived from this one chapter or paragraph of Rabbi Nachman, the first one. That's all we need. You have proof that the first chapter is like that. You can do the same thing with every chapter in the Tikuney, every Torah, and show how all of the Shulchan Aruch, or Gemara, or Kabbalah is found in that. This Rav Nachman proved. He proved this to the skeptics, not chas v'sholem, to those who have emunah in Arizal's words. You don't need any proof. We know, we believe that emunah shleima in Arizal's greatness, Arizal's greatness and the greatness of his Torahs are unmatched, unparalleled, and certainly Arizal said they contained the whole Torah in it. Naturally, they contained it. There's no question about that. But for one who has any doubt, one who wants to see an example of it, even if he believes, we have in Nachman's writings to show that there is the whole Torah included in the first chapter. In different places he proceeds to show a little connection to other parts of the Torah. Then he also said too, speaking about the topic of saying Torah. Now, there are a lot of Sforim, untold number of Sforim written by great tzaddikim in the past. Are all Sforim alike? And what is the difference between a sefer written by one tzaddik, written by another tzaddik, two different tzaddikim? Then they'll say the difference is the same as the difference between one Navi and a second Navi. For example, one Navi, Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader, the Rebbe of all Nevi'im, he could see, a prophet is called a seer, a chazer. He could see a vision. When a Navi sees a vision, generally, as the Gemara says, he is placed into a trance. He's not fully awake. He's in a semi-sleep, in a trance. In his mind, he sees this vision, a heavenly vision. It's different sights, as we find the words of the Nevi'im. The Navi says, I saw this sight, I saw this vision passing by. In every Navi you find that, Isi, and I saw. But this was a vision where the Navi was in a trance. He was not fully conscious. That's called a sight, like a mirror, that's cloudy, hazy. One Navi there was, who saw in a mirror, could see with clarity, with complete perception, and complete consciousness. That was Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem said, I speak to Moshe Rabbeinu as to a person, one person to the other. Kaviyachal. He's completely wide awake when I speak to him, and his vision is the clearest of all. The same thing holds true with the Torahs taught by these different tzaddikim. There is one whose Torah is hazy and cloudy. What is it based on generally? A chiddush is said, a topic is selected, there are chidushim, new ideas presented, and they must have a basis on which to rest. The basis is where the author refers to a certain posek in the Torah. He shows how his words are found in that posek, or you interpret that posek to fit his words. But sometimes this thought, this concept, is seen in that posek remotely. There is a hint at this thought in that posek. The words resemble what he's saying. So he shows a remote resemblance to what he's saying, proving it from that posek. That's the case of a vision that is hazy, because Torah itself is like a vision. It's like a prophecy. However, the tzadik emes, his words are like a vision that is clear. When he speaks, he gives a chiddush. He brings a posek to back these words. You could see every word that he said is found clearly in the words of that posek. This is one who understands, who has a slight degree of understanding and lumdus, could see at times the amazing clarity of Rabbi Nachman's words, and he brings proof from a statement that he makes in a posek in the Torah, a posek or a Chazal, the Gemara, and you see whatever he said is clearly shown in that posek. He said something new. You learned that posek yourself before. You never knew that this thought exists, and here he shows how clearly that posek tells you this thought he just brought out. This is the difference between one type of Torah and the next. Same difference there is from one type of Nevuah and the other. And it also says too that in the dealing with the saying of Torah, at times, as is normal, in many shiurim, you hear Torah where we give the reference to, proof from, the Rosh Tevis, a Sefer Tevis. You take a sentence, and the first letters of the words of that sentence form a certain word, or the last letters form a certain word. You find this many times, oft times in the Zayda Kodesh, Sefer Kabbalah, or even the Gemara you find at times, Rosh Tevis and Sefer Tevis. This means that we bring out a point hidden in this sentence. It's hidden in the beginning or the end of the letters of this sentence. Now, the Menachem says when that is done, the reason is that the Torah that he said is so high that it cannot be brought out openly. It has to be brought out sort of hiddenly. It's hidden in that sentence, and it's through these silufei asias, combinations of letters, that we bring out this thought, this concept. Combinations of letters, or sometimes gematriyos. You don't see it at all. It's just that numerically it's the same as the other item he's bringing up. And this is because it is a deep hidden remez, a deep hidden topic that is not yet ready to be completely revealed. So it's cloaked in the silufei asias, combinations of letters. Now this is a general statement, but we can understand at least, this means then that where Rabbi Arizal employs the use of these silufei asias, combinations of letters, it means that this topic, this statement, is deeper than the normal statement that he has. It's a deeper topic and a deeper statement. Therefore, the Nosson says that there is a secret that Rabbi Arizal once told. A person who passes away, niftar, stalik, he comes to Elam Haba, and there he's got to go through the problems, standing trial, the ordeal of the fright, the pachad, the fear, get through that process, the heavenly process, till he gets to Gan Eden, if he's zecher. Of course, it would be wonderful if a person who on earth is mikusha to Rabbi Arizal could come there and say, I want to go to Rabbi Arizal directly. I want to circumvent, to avoid all this process that others have to go through, get to Rabbi Arizal and I'm safe. Rosenfeld said that a person could do that in a certain sense. Of course, he has to earn it, he has to merit it. But he could smooth away all the process by employing the use of tzilufei asias. If he learns the tzilufei asias, which Rabbi Arizal used in his sefer, by saying those words, there is a power to it, a potency, that can lead that person to Rabbi Arizal in Elam Haba. Therefore, there is a special sefer written, one of the Nosson's Talmidim, called the Sefer Tzilufei Asias, where he lists all, or practically all of the tziluf Rabbi Arizal has in the Kutei Moharan. Others taught him too. The sayings of Rabbi Arizal, all the tzilufei asias, according to the Aleph phase. It's just a couple of pages. It has all these tzilufei asias. It's in print, of course. We have it printed in the back of our Kitzur and Kutei Moharan. It's important for a person to look at it, read it. We said it's only a few pages, besides the fact that it's fascinating to see these combinations, to know how vital it is for a person to know them, to learn some of them by heart, if possible. A person can learn them all by heart, how wonderful it is, but how beneficial this is here, in life here, knowing them, and how infinitely precious it is there. This, Rabbi Nachman said again, is a point where when using these tzilufei asias, it shows that the Torah, the topic, is deeper than the normal, and therefore this must be employed. Rabbi Nachman said that one who is bucky in his Torah and his sayings of Arizal too, that person can find in Arizal's words every topic that is spoken of in the world, whether it's business, whether it's sports, whether it's weather, anything at all, a current topic. You walk out in the street, you go to business, and you get into a conversation. If you have learned Likutei Moharan that day, you'll find a topic refers to something you've learned. Sometimes it's amazing. If you watch carefully, you'll notice that. It's amazing how it's possible that the topic you're speaking of now, we just learned about that referral to it in Likutei Moharan. How is that possible? By nature, it seems impossible. Every day, what you learn, you have throughout your daily routine, you'll find that the topics that people speak about refer to what you've learned. This is a heavenly power. This alone can show a person the heavenly wisdom of the Arizal that incorporates everything into his sefer. Not just that it covers the Teda Shel Teda Shel Peh, but even current topics, politics or anything at all, you find referral to it in the Arizal's words. But of course, I'll stress this requires a bekiyus. One who studies carefully, one who delves into the words, one who concentrates on the words, that person can find in the Arizal's Teda everything, words of Teda, and also Teda in the world, and also current topics too. Rosenfeld tells that one day, Arizal's Talmidim entered into his room. Arizal took out a slip of paper. On it was written in his handwriting a Teda that he had not yet taught. He said to his Talmidim, there are a number of Tedas written on this piece of paper, and there are many heavenly worlds. We speak about the division of 4 levels of the worlds. Actually, just as we have many stars and planets in this universe, which is the Olam HaAsiyah, the physical world, so too above in heaven, above in the spiritual world, there are many planets or worlds there. And these worlds require nourishment. You cannot feed these worlds earthly food. They require a special type of nourishment. And their life and nourishment comes from the words of Teda spoken by a tzadik emes, either spoken or sometimes unspoken. So Menachem said that the Teda I wrote down on this slip of paper has a Teda of such a depth that this will nourish and feed innumerable worlds above, heavenly worlds. They will receive the nourishment from these words of Teda. How? Just by taking these words that are now written on the slip of paper and setting fire to the paper. As the smoke rises up, this bit of smoke will nourish all those heavenly worlds. And that's something, again, we cannot understand, of course. We can only just gasp and marvel at Arizal's greatness and holiness, that he has control over such items. His mastery of the heavenly worlds, the knowledge about these worlds, and the ability to be able to say, to conceive of such a depth of Teda where he writes these words down, and in the burning of the words, where they're not even revealed to his students or to the world, that alone can nourish the heavenly worlds. This is far above our own conception. But again, it strengthens our emunah in Arizal's greatness, and it should give us a deep, gratifying feeling how fortunate we are to be zecher, to know of this tzadik emes, and to have emunah shlema, to be close to the tzadik emes, which of course we have to struggle to continue being. It's not that simple. There are a lot of opposing forces the Satan uses to tear away a person from the tzadik emes, from this type of emunah. We have to strengthen ourselves very much to do battle against these opposing forces, not to allow ourselves to slip, to fall away, chas v'sholem, but to be strong throughout our lives. We should be zeichet that this should continue on the rest of our lives, And, of course, then was zeichet to the eternal tie, connection, binding to the Menachem. And then also, too, that even if one does not hear, say in the time of Arizal's life, we, of course, today would envy those Talmidim who were zeichet to come to Rabbi Arizal's shir. You picture those days, not too long ago, less than 200 years ago, this took place. Rabbi Arizal spoke, gave a shir live. Talmidim sat around, listened to Rabbi Arizal's words. Going back, we could picture this. Let's say we go back. There are some today, many here. For example, who was zeichet to be in Eretz Yisrael and sit at the Rabbi Chaim shir. Shlita. Rabbi Chaim was the greatest tzadik today, who gives a shir in Rabbi Arizal's teachings. How fortunate those people are. They can sit at the shir of such a great tzaddik. Or those who were zeichet in the past generation to sit at Rabbi Nachman's shir. The depth of his shir, also in Rabbi Arizal's teachings, what a privilege that was. What a zechiyah, a zechus to hear, to see, and to hear Rabbi Nachman give a shir. Picture then going still further back, to one hearing a shir generation back from Rosenfeld. Rosenfeld giving a shir in the Kutei Halachas live. And then going back to picturing how fortunate those Talmidim were who sat at the Rabbi Arizal's table while he gave a shir, a live shir, original shir, the Kutei Maran, or Sichos. You picture that, what a wonderful feeling that was then, what it must have been like. We can only have that again after Mashiach comes, Tchias HaMesim, or in Gan Eden. We hope, of course, that Tchias HaMesim, Mashiach will come first, because we expect momentarily, definitely, Mashiach will come now. So that's the very next step of becoming a Mashiach, and then we will have a live shir of Arizal, but again, picture the zechus, the thrill of a person sitting at the Arizal shir. Now, there were times, though, the shir was so packed that possibly Rabbi Arizal's voice could not project that far back to those sitting in the rear. As much as they wanted to, as much as they had a desire to learn, to hear, they could not catch the words. They felt badly about it. The question was, what did they accomplish by sitting there without catching the words? Rabbi Arizal spoke about this, and he said that even if a person attends a shir, and he does not hear the words of Torah spoken, he cannot catch those words, either because he cannot catch them, or because even if he hears them, he doesn't understand them, but he does not hear or understand the words that are being spoken. The words of the tzadik emes are not clear to him, either audibly or mentally, he cannot grasp them. But the fact is that at least he hears the voice of the tzadik emes without being able to make out the words that are spoken. Just hearing that voice alone is sufficient. That he has already accomplished immeasurably. The posek says, "L'shmoya b'kol devorei," to hear the voice of Hashem, the voice of the words, not to hear the words, just the voice alone. One who is present in a house, and Rabbi Arizal spoke Torah, is immeasurable. Believe shir, there's no way to appraise the value. Just to be present at that time, even if he could not make out the words, he failed to grasp the shir, just hearing it alone, that alone is priceless. And of course, everything Rabbi Arizal said was intended as a lesson for us, not just for then, as we'll find later on. Rabbi Arizal said, my words are not for you alone, the Talmidim who are alive then, but for Talmidim of later generations too, for all generations in the future. This lesson too refers to the future. This is something we've stressed many times. For example, I've seen the case of a shir given by Rabbi Nachman Mendel. I mentioned a number of times that the last shir I attended It's impossible to describe the feeling, the thrill of sitting at a shiur, Arizal's depth and speaking in Devekus, where he spoke with such a slavus. There was a burning fire in his eyes. You could see that he spoke with his soul, nafshi yotze b'dabre. It was the neshama that was speaking. And when he went into depth, it was very difficult to follow. So generally, you would hear words, but you couldn't make out what the words were. That is, you couldn't make out the association, which became too deep to grasp. Yet, of course, there was a desire to listen, just to watch, to listen, to hear the voice, the sound. And the question was, of course, it was heartbreaking. You tried so hard to listen to the shiur, to gain the shiur, the knowledge of the shiur. You walked away without gaining much in volume. Here, Rabbi Nachman says, don't worry about that, because even if you did not understand, if you did not hear the words, you're too far away to hear it, it is still toiv. Now, there's a word toiv that's good. Toiv ma'oid is very good. Rabbi Nachman uses the word toiv ma'oid, very, very good, and then adds bali shiur, immeasurably, infinitely. This is an important consolation. Because let us say today, we've had cases of those who were a little in doubt. They felt badly. Today, you want to go to the shiur of so great a tzadik, Chaim, who gives the shiur, and let us say that you cannot grasp the words because you don't understand the language. He speaks in Yiddish. You sit there, the shiur takes an hour. And it's frustrating, you feel badly, others understand it. You spend a full hour with the full, firm desire of learning the words of the tzaddikim, learning the words that Ben Arizal spoke as related by the present-day tzaddik. And yet, there's no way, because you don't understand Yiddish. You don't understand the language that's being spoken. Here again, the Ben Arizal's words apply. If you're present at that shiur, as far as you're concerned, all you hear is a voice. You cannot make out the words because you don't understand the language. You get the voice, if you hear that voice, it is not just good, it is not just very good, it's this applies throughout, because what you are hearing is the words that the Ben Arizal spoke, given to us by the Ben Arizal's Talmidim. So if ever we hear a shiur that is not too comprehensible, we feel perhaps that we're not fit to hear that shiur, or we're behind in understanding, never feel depressed about this. On the contrary, feel very happy that about you, about us, we have a special paragraph saying by the Ben Arizal. Do not fret over it. Do not feel badly, because it is toiv mi'oid mi'oid bali shiur. This is the lesson that Ben Arizal taught then. And of course, too, Ben Arizal referred to the fact that the origin of this statement is found in the very beginning, when the Jews were zeicher to hear the voice of Hashem at Har Sinai. So again, there we find the Torah says that Zulasi Koil, the Jews heard. What did they hear? A voice. They could not make out the words. They were not fit. They were not on that level. Moshe Rabbeinu could receive the words of Hashem. Many different interpretations for it. The Sifrei Kabbalah say that what was given were the Chav Beis Asfon Deraisa, the 22 letters of the Torah, in a complex, jumbled form. Just letters upon letters. To resolve that puzzle, take those letters and shape them into the actual words, that was an impossibility for the normal person. Moshe Rabbeinu had that power of being able to alter these letters, to reshape them into the actual words that Hashem spoke. So the Torah says, Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Jews, that you were there at Har Sinai. You heard a koil, you heard a sound, you heard a voice. Not words, but a voice. And how fortunate you were be able to hear the voice of Hashem. That's enough. A schus like that, that's immeasurable. This is the origin. This stems the lesson that in all future generations, it is still the words of Hashem. Tzadik Emes is Torah, speaks the words of Hashem, elaborates on it, and this voice that a person hears is, if he is zecher to be present, he is zecher to be able to receive this voice, ultimately, Arizal adds elsewhere, ultimately, even the words become clear. As long as you hear the voice, not understand the words, be assured that your neshama does absorb these words. Eventually, in Gan Eden, for example, you'll have all this clearly explained, clearly understood by the neshama. Eventually, too, a person who strives hard enough in life will advance to a point where he'll understand much deeper that which was difficult to understand previously, that which he had to rely purely on emunah alone. He hears a voice, doesn't understand a word, but he has faith that this is the voice of a tzadik. It's only emunah. Emunah is the lowest level of the spheres, the malchus. The person who has that emunah b'shleimus eventually is zecher to go from that emunah up to the highest rung, a chachma, where he has complete wisdom and understanding of these words. We should be zecher to receive, to accept the emunah shleima, the words of the tzaddik emes, to be truly mekusher, attached to Rabbeinu Zal's words, to learn his Torah, and to merit being attached to Rabbeinu Zal, l'netzach, l'netzach netzachim. That's because we should see the Bias Mashiach Tikuney, the Binyan Beis Hamikdash and Heda, the Apollo of all the Yisrael Yisrael throughout the world, throughout the Deidos, Yeshua, Kloli, and Heda. Amen. Amen.